Today's video is about the Prolox Evolved 3-star cylinder. This is the new one that's been causing all sorts of fuss and people picking it and claiming to be the first. What I'm going to do is just show you how I've managed to pick this lock and work through the various issues that it presents. I was sent a copy of this lock, a pre-release copy of this lock last year, and which was picked full rotation long before everybody else was claiming to have done it. But that's not what this video is about. What this video is about is the lock itself and the challenges this lock presents as a locksmith and lock picker, and the way that I've worked my way through these challenges to be able to do the ultimate opening one of these locks with a full 360-degree turn on the cam, which is the part that obviously operates the lock in the door, and not just picking it with the front of the cylinder removed, or using effectively a 2-in-1 tool that's been adapted to be able to pick this. So before we go any further, what I'm going to do is talk about what I've actually had to do to be able to pick it. And you need to understand what's inside this lock. So there are 6 pins in total. None of them are security pins, apart from one which is actually a magnetic element. And the magnetic element means that on the key itself you have a magnet. On this particular key it's in position 3, and that magnet operates a magnetic pin, and without that you can pick the lock, but you'll never get it to turn because that pin will be blocking the rotation of the core. So 6 pins, and they are all standard pins. There's no spool pins or anything particularly difficult from a pin perspective in here. But then when you add the magnetic elements, that adds an extra challenge for a hand pick. And then also on both sides of the cylinder we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4, 5, 6 spool pins, like a little mushroom shaped spool pins. Once they drop into the keyway, they can bind this core up really tightly and make it difficult for you to be able to proceed past them, because obviously 3 pins need to be picked. On the top of the cylinder there's a further 5 pins. These are passive key control pins. You can see them on the key itself, and that's these here, and they are literally just the pin lifted up or not lifted up, and they correlate to a groove in the top of the cylinder. Here's one that I've stripped down, and there's a groove in the top here, and if you put the wrong key in and you lift one of the passive key control pins, it will lock itself into here and you will not be able to use that key to open the cylinder. But from a picking perspective, we can ignore those altogether, because they don't actually offer any resistance when we're hand picking, because they all basically sit at the low position, and it's only when the key's inserted that they get lifted into the high position and allow the core not to be rotated. The other thing that's quite clever with this lock from a pick proof perspective is this little bit of warding that's on the tip of the key here. As you can see, it's basically flat until you get to pin 5 and pin 6, and that little bit of warding adds just a little bit of extra challenge to when you put your dimple pick or flag pick in. It needs to be able to rotate around and fully depress the pin that's actually sitting inside this warding. So you may find you've got a flag pick that works really well on the first 4 pins, and then it won't work on those last 2. What I've done is I've taken this standard number 2 and I've changed the tip. I've actually reshaped the tip. I've made it narrower and slightly reduced it in its length. And now that actually reaches to the back of the lock and is able to fully depress that pin at the back without any sort of dramas like we were having before. So how do we defeat this lock? Well, the first thing is we need to take the magnetic element into consideration. And what I tried first was using a cut down key. So the cut down key removes all of the bitting and all of the key control pins down one side. And what I did is I just simply left the magnetic element in position. So when that was popped in, I was able then to manipulate the pins either side of that. But obviously the magnet was being operated by that position in the key. Now, as you can see, even with that sort of ground down, getting the pick over the top of there and moving the pick in and out is a challenge, and it makes it very difficult to for when you're picking. And also to get this into the lock, that's actually acting as a barrier, and you need to pick the pins to be able to get the key to be inserted into the lock. And you also need to pick the pins to pull the key back out. So although this was a reasonable solution, and there's a video of me picking using this, I would say it's not the most ideal solution long term. But also, when you start taking this amount of metal away from the key, what you will find is the magnet will then sometimes fall out. And so there we can see one where the magnet has actually fallen out. And in this particular case, the magnet stayed inside the lock. It got pushed to the back, and then once that happens, you cannot get the magnet out. It's curtains. That lock, then the only way that you're going to recover that lock is to actually take it apart. And when you take a 3-star lock apart with a locking cam, then basically the lock is bricked, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a while. So although I tried this solution, it did work, but not reliably. But also what seems to happen, and I really don't know a massive amount about these type of magnets, but when you grind this part of the key away, whether you hand file it, whether you use your key machine, whatever you use, the vibration and the actual effect of doing that seems to reduce the magnetism on the pin. So this is actually nowhere near as magnetic as it was before, but the other side is pretty strong. But when this is in isolation and everything's been taken away from around it, the strength of the magnet becomes a lot weaker, and therefore making it really a little bit flaky when it comes to being able to operate the magnetic pin. So the solution, I've got an independent magnet here. It is a very flat magnet. It's not as tall as the standard one that's inside the key, and by being flat, then obviously that then gives me more space above when there's a pick going in and out over the top of the magnet. And what I've done basically is with some very careful measurements, I've popped a key and I've put a mark on the key. This is a specially shaped dimple tension wrench. You can see that the end of it's been ground off, and that somewhat simulates the end of the key here, and therefore it means that when I push this into the lock, I'm able to grab and operate the cam, because on a 3-star lock there's an internal and an external side. We'll talk about that in a second, but this allows me to make sure that the cam's engaged, and what I've done is carefully marked the position of where this magnet goes, and then I've used a little bit of fabric on top of there just to glue the magnet, top of the magnet, to the actual top of the tension tool. So when that's inserted, I now know that that's going to be over the top of the magnetic element, and as you can see, it's very magnetic, so it's actually going to be operating it, which is brilliant. So this gives me more space for picking on top of the pins, and also allows me to position and operate the cam, which is really good. Now, I mentioned there's an internal and external side on here. On the lock, first thing you'll notice is that the internal side doesn't have the trap pins. So when you pick this lock from an internal perspective, you can then basically rotate the cylinder without worrying about it becoming stuck in the trap pins. The second difference about picking this lock from the internal side is the way that the cam assembly in the center of this lock is configured. It means that the cam is permanently engaged under spring tension from the internal side, and then to be able to rotate the cam from the external side, the cam has to be, or that spring tension needs to be overcome, and then the cam needs to be pressed in, or the tension tool needs to be pressed in, and then that will then pick up this cam. So again, picking from the internal side, you don't worry about trap pins, and you don't really worry about picking up the cam because it's there as a matter of course. Whereas from the outside, you need to be able to concentrate on trap pins as well as being able to maintain the tension on the actual cam assembly, or picking up that cam assembly. You'll also notice that there's several sort of silver pins here, and this lock is configured so that if there's an attack on the front and this front piece is snapped off, or it's removed, or it's drilled out, and this core just moves just a little bit outwards, inside this chamber here there's a pin that at the moment is being held down, but the moment that this core comes out, that pin will shoot up and it will lock the cam assembly from rotating, but only from the external side of the lock, not from the internal. That's why the internal side is permanently engaged and the external side needs to be engaged. But if there's any tamper on this lock, and I believe it's a bit of a prerequisite on a 3-star lock, any tampering with the front of this lock or removal, this cam goes into lockdown, and the key or picking basically will not work from the front from that point onwards. So what I've done is very carefully stuck this magnet onto this tension tool. As you can see, it's in the right position. And when we're picking this, when I pop that in, the first 2 pins, this is position 3, the first 2 pins will get in the way of that magnet. So what I'm going to do is just pop my pick in there and just put those first 2 pins down as I'm pushing the tension tool in. And there we go. And then once that drops into place, that's now in the, whoop, sorry about the camera, that's now in the correct place for the magnet on that lock. And also I know that the cam is being picked up by the tension tool. So now to pick this lock, we've got, out of the 6 pins, 1 of them's already picked with the magnet, and then the other 5 pins just simply need to be set, and they are standard pins, so there's really no challenge from a picking perspective. It's just a case of going backwards and forwards through the lock and setting the pins to the shear line. And what you'll notice is on my actual pick itself, I've actually cut grooves into the pick here to correspond to the pin positions, so that when I've got this in, I know that I'm actually going to be on top of whatever pin correlates to this position. And that makes life a little bit easier when it comes to picking, because you're not really guessing, although you can feel your way through the lock when you're proficient at using these picks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the tension up on the lock, and I'm going to pop this pick in, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to push it all the way to the back, because although the passive key pins on the top don't actually do anything when you're picking, they do actually get in the way of the pick being inserted backwards and forwards. So you just need to be sort of navigate your way over the top and kind of shove them out the way a bit so that you can get the pick. See, at the moment I believe that's the top of the magnet there that's actually causing me a little bit of a problem. Maybe the magnet is stuck to the top of the cylinder and not to the bottom. So let's just carry on trying to get this pick in. I say this is not uncommon. This has happened a few times now. So I'm just going to just tease that pick and rotate the tension tool backwards and forwards until I can just get that in there. Nobody said that this lock was going to be easy from a picking perspective. Let's just get a different tension tool in there and just see whether that will slide over the top of that. So there we go. So I've just popped a thinner tool in there, and that's probably pushed that magnet down, yes. So the magnet, because it's on a flap of material, was actually stuck on the top of the cylinder and not stuck down on the actual pin itself, on the magnetic pin. But now it is, because what I've done is popped the a pick on top of that little bit of material and pushed it down so that it's then in contact with the pin. And so now we're going to go through the picking, and I'm just going to literally go backwards and forwards with little taps on top of each pin. And I am actually going to tap on top of the there's a nice bit of a clicker movement there. I am actually going to tap on top of the magnetic pin as well, because I believe that that's going to help hold that magnet down on top of that pin. So here we go, just going in and out, just paying a little bit of attention to the position of the pick on top of the pins. Going in and out every now and then, we'll get it jammed a bit. So there we go, in it goes, back again, and there we go, we've got the cylinder picked. So that's the first stage. And now what's going to happen is when I rotate this round, the trap pins on the side here are going to fire into the side of the cylinder. And there we go. So now you can see that's actually locked. So we know the trap pins are in position 1, which is there. So I'm just going to pop that trap pin down, and then I'm going to go in a bit deeper. There's position 6 trap pin, and position 4, and position 6. And what I'm doing is just tapping on top of these trap pins just to get them to set. That was 1. That's 4. That's 6. And I'm just going to keep going backwards and forwards, setting the trap pins until basically the lock decides that it wants to rotate. This could sometimes take quite a while to do. Other times it's really quick. Sometimes you only need to set 1 pin. Sometimes you need to back the tension off a little bit and start again, and just keep on trying it. So let's keep on trying. So there's the top of trap pin 1, trap pin 2, a little bit of counter rotation there. Sometimes they give that. There are, that's set. And then trap pin 3. There we go. So that's all 3 trap pins set. And as you can see, the cylinder's carrying on its rotation. Now what's going to happen now is the trap pins could potentially fire into the keyway, and also the driver pins that are sitting in the Bible can also go into that keyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a second tension wrench down the side of that first one, and what that's going to do is it's going to simulate the width of the keys, so that when we go past this point here, as you can see, it's almost like having a key in there that that stops those pins from firing back up into the side of that that keyway. And so now we've got the trap pins are going to fire again in this direction. There we go. So now we're on the second set of trap pins, and again what we need to do is just pick our way past those. So there's the first one. Let's get on top of that trap pin there. There we go, and there we go. So we're now on nearly on a full rotation. I've just realised you haven't actually probably seen the cam rotate. If we just turn this lock around on that very last bit of rotation, hopefully you will see that cam. There we go. And so now that is a genuine single pin picks full rotation of the Prolox 3-star evolved cylinder. And I'm just going to pop this pick in and push those first 2 pins down, and that allows me then to take the magnet out. As you can see, the magnet is still there, and what we'll also do is we'll take this lock out of here, keeping it in shot, and you can see that 3 trap pins are here, complete. 3 trap pins are there, complete. There hasn't been anything messed around with on this. It says it's the exterior side, and this I believe is the key for it. So let's pop the key in. That may not be the key for it. That's probably one of the other locks. Oh, here we go. There, that's the key for it, I believe. There we go. And as you can see, the lock is still working in exactly the same way as it was prior to picking. All of the trap pins are there. Nothing's dropped out. No cheating. 100% single pin pick of a complete lock. And if that was in a door, we would have the door open.